Hello, subscribers, to the third part in going through the Apocrypha. For anyone who has not seen the previous videos on this series, I am going through the Apocrypha, which I have never done before. I am not subjecting you to me reading the whole books, but this will be my first time reading them in an attempt to see whether or not they are canon, or should be canon. As always, I will start with my first impression going through as I read it. So, much like in my last video, I'm sure there will be many moments where I will be confused and then later unconfused because something later on explains something that I read. That happened quite a few times in Tobit, and I expect it to happen in Judith as well, which is the book we are covering today. Then after I finish reading it and giving my thoughts, I will then do some actual research and see what arguments there are, if any, that actually defend Judith as canon, and what arguments there are against it. And right away, it's not looking good for Judith. In the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who reigned in Nineveh, great city in the dates of Oxford, over meets in Ecbatane. Right away, this feels like it's the same person who wrote Tobit. And we already know Tobit was just a fiction, written in Greek, most likely before Jesus, but still not in the time when it was claimed to be written. This, in the 12th year reign of Nebuchadnezzar, I'm just going to say Nebuchadnezzar. That may be when this was set, but this probably, most likely, was not written anywhere near that time. Probably centuries later. But we shall see. Let's go through and see what else we can find. I just had to take a break from that first 3 chapters and not much to talk about. It's mostly just about Nebuchadnezzar declaring war on the world, basically. And Israel is hardly mentioned at all, and only seems to really come into play here in chapter 4. Hopefully something comes up that I can respond to, because right now, so far, it's just historical claims that I cannot vet. I assume they're mostly false just because I assume Judith was written centuries later, but I couldn't say anything specific. I can't give any better reason than that. Except, first, it is calling, I assume it's Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians. Is Babylon the same as Assyria? I don't actually know that for sure. I feel like Babylon and Assyria are 2 different places. So is this not Nebuchadnezzar? I'm sure it must be Nebuchadnezzar, because the way they describe him trying to make himself God, that sounds very Nebuchadnezzar-y. But then also, where is it? But then also, verse 3, for they were newly returned from the captivity. Which captivity? The only captivity I really think about is the captivity to Nebuchadnezzar. And the Assyrians? This is making me think I really need to read Kings and Chronicles again. Because here is what I'm remembering right now, and I could be misremembering, but that the northern tribe of Israel was captured by the Assyrians, not the Babylonians, and that happened before the Babylonian capture. So if this is Nebuchadnezzar, according to my memory at least, he's not an Assyrian, Babylonian, or if he is the king of the Assyrians, well, the Assyrian capture happened first. So they would not have been recently returned from captivity. Although even then, I don't think they ever got out of captivity like that. Like, they got out of captivity after Nebuchadnezzar, when Cyrus took over, or at least they started to get out of captivity. But yeah, this doesn't sound right. But I'm not going to read through the whole books of Kings and Chronicles just to find out, because that is way too much to read and I don't know where to look for. So I'll just continue with Judith for now. So we come to chapter 5, and the captain of Nebuchadnezzar's army is asking people who these Israelites are. And they say this people are descended of the Chaldeans. That is unusual. Never heard of the Israelites talked about as descendants of Chaldeans. Was that even common knowledge in the day? Like, that's some deep genealogy you have to know in order to know that. That goes beyond their servitude in Egypt, which when they escaped from Egypt, that's when they made a name for themselves. So that's when people would have noticed them. So why would they know who they were before that? It's sus. Also, this writer spelled Canaan with a CH instead of just a C. But it's also weird to get this detailed of a history from somebody who is not part of them. Also, why do you need to go in this much detail anyway? It seems like more detail than the general actually needed. And there's also this, where the person who obviously wouldn't serve Yahweh says, and God dried the Red Sea before them. Best case scenario, I can only assume that where it says God, it's actually the name of God, Yahweh or Jehovah. Otherwise, the fact that somebody who doesn't serve him, calling him God like that, doesn't really make sense. There is no way somebody who is not Jewish would describe them like this. And whilst they sinned not before their God, they prospered, because the God that hateth iniquity was with them. Nobody outside Israel is going to describe it like that. I am buying this less and less. And this guy just assumes, but now are they returned to their God. How would you know that? You could only ever know that if A, something miraculous happened, or B, they just start winning. They haven't been in any battles yet. All they've done is take up a defensive stance. So there's no way you would know that they return to God. And his advice is, but if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord pass by, lest their Lord defend them. How would you know? How could you possibly know if there was iniquity? As coming into chapter 6, as somebody who watches a lot of anime, this is very reminiscent of anime. You got Israel just being treated like underdogs you would find in an anime, with this guy being, after everything he heard, being completely arrogant and saying, we can take them. Who is God except Nebuchadnezzar? And they will fall before our mighty cavalry and whatnot. It's pretty funny to see that. So, Holofernes, the general of Nebuchadnezzar, allegedly, didn't like what Achior had to say, so he decided to shoot the messenger, but in a rather unique way. He took Achior and gave him to the Israel. Just took him to the nearest city and dropped him off. I guess under the assumption that he will just die along with the rest of Israel when he comes to actually siege it. Alright, chapter 8. So far it's just been going through war stuff. But finally, Judith comes on the scene. Daughter of yada yada yada, the son of Salasadel, the son of Israel. Who is Salasadel? I know Israel's sons, none of them are named Salasabel. So I don't even know which son that is supposed to be. But it seems like more evidence that it was not written at the time it says it was, and instead written in Greek. Okay, this is a bit sus. And she fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbaths, and the Sabbaths, and the eves of the new moons, and the new moons, and the feasts, solemn days of the house of Israel. If your widowhood is lasting a long time, as one would expect, I don't think that's eating enough to actually survive. Like, she would have to be binge eating. So, she's eating once a week, plus an extra meal somewhere in the month, which could land on a Sabbath, which means she's not getting anything extra there. And then occasionally, and the feasts and the solemn days of the house of Israel. So her widowhood had to last quite a while. This does not sound feasible. I don't think somebody can starve themselves that much. And she was also of goodly countenance and very beautiful to behold. Not if she's anorexic. And there's that phrase again I saw in Tobit, the ancients of the city. So this does make it clear that when, I am assuming they are the same author, that when he uses the term ancients, he is talking about elders. Then around verse 32, 33, and 34, Judith is speaking as if she was a prophet. Then said Judith unto him, Hear me, and I will do a thing, which shall go throughout all generations to the children of our nation. And within the days that ye have promised to deliver the city to our enemies, the Lord will visit Israel by mine hand. That is very confidently said for somebody who's not a prophet. Okay, chapter 9, verse 2. Judith is doing a thing. O Lord God of my father Simeon. So why is it saying Simeon here, but Salad, whatever it said in the previous chapter? Inconsistent translation. Strike against canon. Alright, chapter 10. I don't even remember what the last chapter I commented on was, but Judith's plan involves getting all dressed up, taking off her widow clothes, and going down to speak to the leader of the enemies. And she told the guards that she had secrets to tell him to allow him to conquer Israel more easily. So I suspect she's just trying to get close so she can stab him. I don't know. But I stopped to comment about this. Verse 19, the Assyrian soldiers, and they wondered at her beauty and admired the children of Israel because of her, and everyone said to his neighbor, Who would despise this people that have among them such women? Surely it is not good that one man of them be left, who being let go might deceive the whole earth. What? Okay, I came into that without reading that last sentence, and that just confuses me. At first, who would despise this people, and then saying not one of them should be left alive, except the women. I was planning on commenting about who would ever say such a thing as not despising a people because of their women, but then this sentence just feels like it contradicts the sentence right before it. So I don't know. Okay, here's another confusing line here in chapter 11, verse 10. Therefore, O Lord, Judith speaking to the captain about Achius, the guy he gave to Israel. Therefore, O Lord and Governor, respect not his word, but lay it upon thine heart. Don't respect what he says, but believe it? This makes no sense. Which is it? I cannot for the life of me see respect being used in any way that doesn't mean to trust in his word or to listen to it. So this just does not make sense. All right. Now we have another inconsistency. So Judith is speaking to the general, telling him the same thing Acura said, that once Israel sins, there'll be easy pickings. And so far, it just sounds like she's selling them into his hands. She's saying she will pray to God, and God will tell her when Israel sins, and that's when he can go take them. I have to assume she's laying a trap somehow. I don't know how yet, though. But the real issue is that earlier this general specifically said that Nebuchadnezzar was the only God. And he's got no problem here praising Judith, being pleased by her words, even though she admitted to her having a God. That is not Nebuchadnezzar. Now, likewise, Hophni said unto her, God hath done well to send thee before the people. It is inconsistent. This man claims that Nebuchadnezzar is the only God, and here he is admitting there is another, one who is a real God. But I'm doubting that this general is a real person. But moving on. Okay, on to chapter 13, finished. Judith has killed the commander by getting him drunk enough that he didn't notice her chopping his head off. Sounds pretty cut and dry. I don't know what to say about this that's either for or against this being canon, aside from what I already believe about it. It wouldn't be the first time a woman has killed a commander. In fact, it would actually be the third time, if it's true, which I don't think it is. But there's still 3 more chapters to go. So let's keep going. Chapter 14. Here she is again, speaking with the confidence you would expect from a prophet, telling Israel how to scare off the Assyrians. Okay, here's one part which may be considered a Mark IV canon. Achior decided to join Israel and circumcise himself. You don't see that a lot, if at all, in the Old Testament, of people actually joining the Old Covenant who were not born into it. So even as a fictitious story, this is still decent, a point to bring up, as this was the intention. The Gentiles were to be saved through Israel, much like this. Though they didn't necessarily have to be circumcised to do it. But that is a pretty weak mark, though, for considering this to be canon. Okay, this part's a little sus. Everyone's celebrating. Judith goes back to her city, I guess, and many desired her, but none knew her all the days of her life after that Manasseh, her husband, was dead and was gathered to her people. That doesn't sound right. I mean, is it something that would even happen? Like, I can see a widow being a widow still because nobody wants to take her in. But I don't see it happening that the widow refuses a new husband. I suppose it's possible because her husband left her quite a bit of inheritance, so she didn't need the money. But I've already forgotten if she had any children. I feel like that's a little more important than just her being able to support herself. If she doesn't have children, then she needs a husband to give her children. Of course, I also have no idea how old she is, but she must be somewhat young for it to speak of her so goodly. So I don't really know how realistic that is. It's not unthinkable, I guess, but it seems unlikely. And that's the end of Judith. This one is not as obviously bad as Tobit. Most of the problems that you would probably find here are historical problems. I don't think I see anything theological here. And unfortunately, I am not a history guy or geography guy, so I can't really speak to how accurate any of this stuff really is. But that is what part 2 is for. So I'm going to go off and study that, and I will get back to you in a second.
Later.
Okay, well, there wasn't much to find there. First of all, if you look up if the book of Judith is canon, you'll notice there's a YouTube channel just called Judith Canon, which is completely irrelevant. But most of the videos I could see were just giving, like, just from the title and thumbnail, it seemed like they were just reading the book or giving a synopsis of it. But nobody really trying to either give reasons for or against it being canon. But I was able to confirm that, yes, Assyria and Babylon are two different places, and Judith got that wrong, and a bunch of other things. So, much like Tobit, Judith is a work of fiction, but I would say it's even worse than Tobit, in that it's more so trying to present itself as history. So the Catholic Church wants to label Judith as a parable in order to keep it canon, but it is clearly not a parable. The excuse I heard was, which I'll have a link in the description of the video I went for this, but the excuse I heard was that, well, everybody would have known Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon. Nobody would have mistaken this for real history. So the person got it wrong on purpose in order to make it obviously fiction. And that just sounds like the biggest cope. The Catholic Church is chugging its copium on this. First of all, this is not how parables are written. Just go to Job. Like I said earlier, this Job is a parable. It is written like a parable. Someday I need to make a video on Job, but explaining everything, including all the reasons why I think it's a parable. But Job doesn't give you a time frame. It doesn't tell you when it took place. It tells you locations, which which may or may not be real locations. I assume they're real locations. But it doesn't try to be specific about those locations. Just that Job is from the land of Uz. That's it. It's not trying to give you any geography. The lack of specific details about where things are located in relation to others points to Job being a parable, as opposed to actual history. Judith, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It tries to give a lot of detail. More detail, in fact, than I think most Bible stories actually give. Also confirmed that the oldest known copy is in the Septuagint. We do not have any Hebrew manuscripts of Judith. Now, it's not necessarily originally in Greek. It may have originally been written in Hebrew, but we don't have the manuscripts to prove it, so I think that also works against the idea of Judith being canon. And because the Catholic Church treats it as canon, there are people out there who think it's real history. Several of the videos I saw on YouTube, and by saw I mean I didn't watch the videos, I mean I was just looking for videos, but several of them were mentioning how Judith was a banned book. In fact, one of the videos, which I did look at, mentioned Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyria, and it seemed like the person making the video did not realize that Nebuchadnezzar was not king of Assyria, king of Babylon, which tells me he thought Judith was actual history. So no, it is not a good idea to include Judith in canon because it will confuse people. It is written as if it were history, and it's not. This is not Scripture. Scripture will be obvious of what genre it is based on how it's written, not just the facts contained therein. In fact, that is just begging the question. If you assume it's a parable because it got the facts wrong, you are begging the question. If it's a parable, it will be written as a parable. Judith is not written as a parable, and I don't think I have much more to say on this. It is clear that Judith does not belong in the Bible. So the next book I will be going over will be the Wisdom, which is 19 chapters. Hopefully they're short chapters. See you next time.